So most of you would have seen me talk yesterday, and that was the nice presentation. That was the one where I got to rant about the stuff I'm passionate about. But because you're acousticians, I felt like I need to present some data to back up what I said, and that's what today is about. It's more about the data. So apologies if you're not data people, but my understanding is a lot of you are. So yesterday we talked about noises and unwanted sound, but sound levels only account for about 25% of variance. So there's this 75% of other stuff. So we wanted to explore that, and we basically did this via a survey. And the kind of factors we were interested in, I mentioned 4 yesterday, but there was also a whole array of other factors that we wanted to study. So including the personalities, but also about where people work, the different places they work, how they work, perceived control, as I mentioned yesterday, design features, and personal factors. So we carried out a survey, and it was a survey of just over 500 people. Actually, the survey is still open and people are still responding. It's up to 600 now, but it's too late. The door is closed. We've done the analysis. We might go back one day if it gets to 1,000. 500 doesn't seem a lot, especially for a survey that went across the world. I'm very pleased that 3% of the survey sample are Swedes, and we've got quite a few from the Netherlands, thanks to Yvette at Ecofon, and so on. But it's a small sample, let's be honest. But what was good about it is when we looked at the different personality types, we had a good cross-section. And all the personality types were normally distributed, which means we had a nice sample. And 500 responses is statistically valid in terms of the stats we carried out. So yesterday I just talked about introversion, extroversion. When we did the survey, the first thing we did in the survey, there were over 100 questions, and the first thing we did is we got people to fill out their own personality profile, which is based on 40 questions. It's called the Big Five, or OCEAN, and you can see what OCEAN stands for just there. And that was the first thing they did. This is my results. So openness, openness is about how creative you are, whether you're open to new ideas, whether you're artistic. Architects score high on this. I have a little bit of openness, but not too much. Conscientiousness is how diligent you are. You know, my word is my bond, that kind of thing. I turn up on time, etc., etc. Extroversion we talked about yesterday. People. Agreeableness is an interesting one. Agreeableness is how much of a teamwork you are, how much you get on with other people, how much empathy you have, how you support them. It says I'm disagreeable, but I disagree with that, of course. And that's because I tend to challenge people. I can be direct. And then there's neuroticism, and you may not understand the fact that neurotic people tend to be anxious, apprehensive. They wonder what people think about them. So this is a real problem because I love people, I love socializing, but then I spend the next week worrying about what they said about me when I left them. This is my wife, and what you'll notice is that we're pretty much opposites. We're chalk and cheese. And whilst that might, with any team, whilst that might cause a problem when you're initially bonding, once you bond, you form a good team because basically you balance each other out. So her tardiness is balanced by my wishing to turn up on time to everything, which of course annoys her, and so on. So what we did is, as I said, 5 personalities. They were all normally distributed. And for the purpose of the study, all we did is we took the normal distribution and we compared the people, one standard deviation out at one end with one standard deviation out at the other end. So we basically formed 3 groups of people for each personality type. And just going back to more general results before we talk about personality, I mean, the interesting thing here is that in terms of, we asked people how much they thought the acoustic environment affected their productivity. And you can see that 2/3 of people over here said that it affected their productivity a little to very much so. But even more, I think, interesting than that data is this one here. And we asked people to estimate how much their performance was affected by the acoustic environment. And 2/3 of the people thought their acoustic environment was having a negative effect on their productivity. These are all office workers. And we actually asked them to estimate it. And if we estimated the impact of noise on performance productivity, it came out as about -5%. And as I said yesterday, -5 doesn't sound like a big number, but in terms of the cost to businesses of their property, it's a big number. We can pay for our property with 5% performance. And then we ask people, okay, so you're not happy with the acoustic environment. What do you do about it? And these are some of the coping strategies that people use. And you can see the one at the bottom is, they try and work from home occasionally. But I thought there's some interesting ones here as well, more interesting ones here. A third of people say they use headphones or earplugs, and there's a bit of debate in offices whether that's a good or bad thing, because it seems a bit antisocial and you can't hear what people are saying. But also, very few people raise the issue with their colleagues, and I mentioned that yesterday. We tend not to challenge people and tell them to bugger off and go and be noisy somewhere else. We asked people about, as well as the personality question, we asked a lot of questions about noise distraction and whether it affected hearing speech, whether it affected your concentration, just too many questions actually about noise distraction. But the first thing we looked at as well is how does your primary place of work affect you? And you can see here that where a high number is better, people thought that their homes offered them more perceived control, and they thought they were better acoustically designed. Obviously, they got more freedom to do that. So that was the first thing. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying that means we should move everyone to homes, because the offices are important, because they have lots of other functions. Right, more data, sorry, but this is what today is about for me, data. So these are all the different noise perception metrics. They're not all of them, actually. This is a summary, and we did factor analysis to combine some of the scores. But again, you can see that in general, the home tends to score better than the private or shared office, and it scores better than the open plan desk. But as I said, that does not mean go away from here saying, oh, it's all about homes and not desks, because of this. So we asked people where they preferred, or where the most effective spaces were for their creative, their best ideas, concentration, team working, and so on. And again, what you see here is, again, the home is doing quite well. I mean, it's certainly considered the most productive place overall. But in terms of things like team working, meeting colleagues, socializing, then it's the office environment, spaces, the breakout space, and so on that are important. So what we're saying is about the balance. Occasionally people need to work from home, particularly for concentration, and surprisingly for making private calls. But we need the office for people to come together, of course, to work together, and so on. So it's a balance. I'm not saying one is better than the other. And all the results here are marked as statistically significant. I haven't put all the data in. You can get that from the report, which is freely available. But what you can see here is the effect of different personality types now on the different metrics of performance, or different noise metrics, sorry. So we didn't actually find much of a difference for those more open versus those more closed. But conscientious, there were quite a lot of effect there. Extroversion, as we expected. Agreeable, a few, but not much. But neurotic, quite a lot. So again, this just supported the evidence, the literature review I presented yesterday. This just supported the fact that personality does affect our perception of noise. And in particular, neuroticism, extroversion, and conscientiousness. And the other thing we looked at, we asked people where they spend their time, and extroverts spend less time in the office, and less time doing concentration work, and less time doing heads down work and computing. And I find that interesting, because most offices, certainly in the UK, it's all about collaboration, socialising, big ideas, creativity, so noisy, buzzy, stimulating spaces. But what this kind of says to me is we're designing offices for the people who aren't there. So I think that's something we can all learn from. Okay, and a few more factors. Sorry, I'm rushing through this, just trying to give you a gist, because you can read it all at leisure. This one surprised us. We asked people to estimate how much time at work was spent in concentration. We expected a big result here, and we didn't get it. I go into the paper why I think that might happen, but we think it's to do with the fact that although, if that's your job, concentrating, it don't matter what the distractions are, you've got to get your job done and you've got to perform. But that one definitely needs more study. Perceived control, we said how important that was yesterday, and again we're seeing it here, that people's perception of how much control they have over their acoustic environment means that affects not just their productivity, but their sense of well-being and stress and so on. And screening ability, that's an interesting one. That's come through the literature quite a lot. People's natural ability to screen. Well, we don't know if it's a natural ability or it's a learned ability, i.e. adaptation. But if people believe they can screen noise, then they're less affected by noise. So that makes sense, but again, and the literature suggests that that might be linked to personality types. We actually found screening ability correlated with all personality types, but not one in particular. So a bit of a null result there. And then design effectiveness, as I mentioned, people, if they believe their workspace was better designed, then their reaction to noise was better. So some key variables there. We created a design index, and we did this we had a list of good and bad acoustic treatments or solutions. So was it an exposed concrete ceiling versus was it absorbing materials or rafts? Was there absorption materials on the walls? Did they have breakout spaces away from the desk, or were they in the desk? And we got people to tick them, and we just added up, we tallied it. And by the time we tallied it, we found a great correlation between that little tally of good acoustic design features and their perception of how noise affected their performance. So that's something we want to use going forward. And just to finish, the last thing we did is we put all of our variables into a big regression analysis, multiple regression analysis, and we just saw what it kicked out. And what you can see here is that there's different variables coming into the equation, screening, ability to screen, acoustic design features, whether they homework or not, some of the personality factors, and so on. And do you remember yesterday at the start today I was saying the kind of correlation between noise and sound levels is about 25% variance. And we were trying to find that other 75%. And what we found here is some of the variables accounting for up to 40%. So it's a start. We think, if we add that to the 25%, we're starting to actually understand what factors actually determines people's perception of noise and how they react to it. And we talked yesterday about DARE, so we don't need to talk about that today. And I'm going to leave that slide up because we also talked about what we can do in terms of doing an acoustic evaluation and looking at work activities and looking at people's personality profiles and looking at other variables like age. Age came out as a key factor. And then that helps, as Paige mentioned, helps all the trades, all the specialists to come together and create the perfect acoustic solution, I hope. Thank you.